Welcome back to Real Takes, where we are all movie love all the time. I'm Ann Stott, and tonight we are starting the way we always start now, which is by highlighting an organization that I think is doing important, valuable work and that I think deserves all our support. And we are now officially in Gay Pride Month, and I would like to highlight the Trevor Project, which is a beautiful organization which provides supportive services to queer, gay, lesbian, trans youth throughout the country. They have a national hotline that gay and trans youth can call for support. They have all kinds of other services. I just think they're a vital organization, especially in this time when gay and trans youth are under attack in so many states across the country. So please check out the link that I will put in the description below and consider supporting the Trevor Project. Now, as you know, we follow the astrological calendar here, so we are still in Gemini time, but it is also Gay Pride. So I want to celebrate Gay Pride as well. And there are a couple of different ways you can come at celebrating gay, trans pride in film. One of them is to choose films with gay or trans content. And another way to do that is to celebrate filmmakers who are queer. And tonight I want to celebrate Chantal Akerman. I sort of can't believe it's taken me this long to talk about Chantal Akerman on this show, but Chantal Akerman was a lesbian avant-garde filmmaker who worked from the 70s until her death in the teens of this century. And she was a complete original. She made a movie called Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080 Bruxelles, which is routinely the only film directed by a woman that shows up on lists of the 50 best films ever made in the world. Now, obviously, the fact that she's the only female filmmaker on these lists says as much about the people making the lists and how little access women filmmakers, gender nonconforming filmmakers, queer filmmakers have had, not to mention Black filmmakers, people of color filmmakers, etc., how little access those filmmakers have had to the resources to make the kind of movies that then gets considered for these lists. But it also says a lot about the originality of her film, Jeanne Dielman, that it is included on this list. Chantal Akerman is Belgian, and she started making short films in the late 60s. She considered going to film school. I think she went briefly, and then she was like, I'm already making movies. I don't need to be here to make movies. I need to just make movies. And she went to New York City, and she became immersed in this sort of avant-garde experimental film work that was happening in New York at the time. She spent 3 years in New York. She made several films there, and then made a string of powerful, important movies, starting with Je tu il elle, and then Jeanne Dielman, then News from Home, then Les Rendez-vous d'Anna, or The Meetings of Anna, and the list goes on from there. There's a lot out there on Jeanne Dielman because it's so important and was such a milestone in filmmaking. And I have huge respect for that film, and I highly recommend that everyone watch it. It's stars Delphine Seyrig as a single mother, and it's 3 days in her life where we take this incredibly studied look at her day-to-day rituals and everything she does around the house, which includes once a day, she has a man come and pay her for sex in her apartment while her son is at school. So it's smashing up prostitution with all of these like very traditional housewifely duties, and a series of things happen that are out of her control that then undoes her routine. And this movie is 3.5 hours long, and you are immediately transported into this world and her sense of time, and taken on the experience of this woman in her life. So Jeanne Dielman is a very important movie that I highly recommend. But I actually want to talk about the movie she made after that, which is called News from Home. So Jeanne Dielman, going back to Jeanne Dielman screened at the Cannes Film Festival, and there's some great interview footage of Chantal Akerman talking about that experience. She said people literally got up and walked out of the screening. People were uncomfortable in their chairs. She could hear people kicking and shifting and whatever, and she thought it was going to be a flop. And then the next morning, she had offers from like 25 film festivals around the world, and she was being hailed as the new greatest auteur of cinema that there was. And she was 25 years old. So it was a big moment in her life. And she said in this interview that, you know, it was obviously very exciting and she was very pleased, and she was also terrified that she would never be able to live up to that moment again. And then she made this film, News from Home, which she made about her time in New York City. So News from Home came out in 1976. She lived in New York from like 1970 to 1973. And the film is literally shots of New York City and Chantal Akerman off camera reading some of the letters she got from her mother in Belgium while she was living in New York. That's the whole movie. And this is definitely, just FYI, the most experimental film I have talked about so far on this channel. So you have to, you know, be ready for a different kind of cinematic experience than your standard linear narrative, for sure. I find this movie mesmerizing, and I am stunned by its courage and its vulnerability and its simplicity and its power every time I watch it. And I can't believe she had this idea and she was determined and clear enough to follow it through the way she must have seen it in her mind. Because, I mean, it's simple, but it's powerful. So it becomes this study about alienation and displacement, about what is community and what is family, what connects us and what doesn't connect us. And now it's a real timepiece too of what it was like to be away from your people before cell phones and before, you know, Zoom. I mean, in these, she only reads the letters from her mother. She doesn't read the letters she sent to her mother. And I don't think she reads all the letters from her mother. She's clearly, you know, chosen the one she wanted to read. But, you know, how separated they really were, because they weren't calling each other even regularly in the 70s. That was a very expensive thing to do. And it's not even clear to me that Chantal Akerman had a phone where she was living in the early 70s in New York City. And in other interview footage, she's talked about the fact that she lived basically in a flop house. So I don't think she had a phone. So it's also become this really interesting experience of communication from another time. And then there are these shots of New York City, and they are stunning, powerful, moments in New York City. And Chantal Akerman is known for her long shots. Like, that's one of the things she's known for, is that she asks us to sit and watch differently and in a different time frame than we're used to, and certainly than we're used to now. But even then, she demanded something of us that very few filmmakers demand of us. And the first series of shots are all static, so the camera doesn't move at all. And then sometimes the camera moves a little, sometimes it doesn't, and then we start to move. Suddenly we're on the subway, and it's a still shot in the subway with people getting on and off, or we're in a car and the camera's moving. So by the time you get to that, even that small shift is so exciting and so revelatory. A simple change that in another film we wouldn't even think about is suddenly a big moment. And then we have these letters talking about her mother's health and her father's health and the store they run and family members and who's had a birthday. And there's this interesting mix of support and sort of maybe passive aggressive urging to come home, and why aren't you here, and why aren't you here yet, and when will you come back, and why haven't we seen you, and that sort of thing. So there's a very interesting blend of emotions coming out of these letters. And actually Chantal Akerman's relationship with her mother would be a theme in her work until the end. So her last movie was called No Home Movie, and it's a documentary about her mother, who survived Auschwitz but never talked about it, and with whom Chantal Akerman was clearly very close. And so, you know, this movie really kind of kicks off that theme in her filmmaking, you know, with some force. But then we also have these letters, you know, telling us the news of this family and these people we start to connect with, like, oh, Sylvain had another birthday, and oh, what happened with the uncle's surgery, or, you know, you start getting invested in these characters that you literally never see on camera. But we're juxtaposing this description of family life against these shots of New York City, which is, on the one hand, you could say is like sort of tight community versus, you know, alienated masses of people. But I think there's also a sense of like two different kinds of community, and this question of where do we feel at home. And she's getting this news from one home, and yet she clearly feels compelled to be in this other place. That's her home right now. So news from home, but she's in this other home. So there's this question of what is community, what is alienation, what is family. You know, what sounds like family may not always feel like family. What looks like alienation may actually feel like closeness. Just because she leaves so much unsaid, it leaves all these questions up for grabs for us. It's really powerful filmmaking. And it's funny, again, Jeanne Dielman has talked about so much, but when you really start talking to filmmakers, News from Home comes up a lot as a favorite or a you know, a flashpoint for people. And I just want to finish by reading a quote from Chantal Akerman. She said, often when people come out of a film, a good film, they would say that time flew by without them noticing. And what I want is to make people feel the passing of time. So I don't take 2 hours from their lives. They experience them. And that is always true for Chantal Akerman with me. When I finish watching any Chantal Akerman film, I have been changed in how I experience time, and I've also been changed in how I look at everything around me. I see everything around me differently, and I feel the passing of time differently within my body. So that's pretty impressive for me. That's some great art that can do something like that. So all praise to Chantal Akerman, all gratitude for all her courageous work. Please check out any of her films, but big love for News from Home. Even if you think it's not your thing, even if you're like, oh my God, I don't want to watch Shots of New York and hear Letters from a Mother. If you have access to it, watch it for 15 minutes. See how it feels. You don't have to commit to the whole movie. Just get a taste of what that kind of filmmaking is like. Even if you don't make it through the whole movie, you'll get something, I promise. And again, I want to shout out to the Criterion Collection and the Criterion channel, because most of what I've said here, besides my own personal impressions, I've learned through interviews that are on the Criterion channel or in the Criterion Collection editions of her films. So big love to the Criterion channel. Big love to Chantal Akerman. Thanks for tuning in. Please watch one of her movies. I will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for watching Real Takes. Hit the subscribe button below so the algorithms will tell you when new episodes are out. And if you want to support Real Takes, please visit my Patreon page, where you can join at any tier from $2 to $100 per thing I make. The $15 tier is specifically about supporting Real Takes, and you'll get behind the scenes information and be thanked in future videos. See you next Wednesday.